So let me run through a little bit of history here, because some of you may be very aware and some of you may not. The way this came about, many of you should know that I was the head of innovation at Yahoo and suffered the immune system problem. And then I got to Singularity and the board said, build it in the way that you think. And we designed SU with a series of concentric circles. And there was a particular story that was amazing to me, which was we had the dean of the London Business School, arguably one of the best business schools in the world, come by just before we were launching. And he came along, and he was British, so he's a bit pompous, came along with 4 or 5 newspapers with big articles about SU in them, spread it all out on the conference room table and said, I don't know what you're doing here. You have $2 million of PR here, and what are you doing? That's different. And I'm the best business school in the world. I can't buy an article in a newspaper. So he described the model and et cetera. And he finally said, how big is your team? And there was like 5 of us in the room, and we said, well, this is us. And you could see his mind break. Literally, he mentally left the building because he was like, my personal staff in my office is 12 people. How can you build an entire university with 5 people? And literally about 20 minutes later, he said, do you mind if we go outside and play Frisbee? And literally he was off, and they were playing Frisbee for 2 hours afterwards, and he was like gone. And that struck me, because here's a guy at a fairly cutting edge thing, and yet the model of how we were building it was completely alien to him. That was 2009. Okay, so the meme kind of got stuck in about then. Then we kind of built out SU over a couple, 2, 3, 4 years. And about 2011, I started doing lectures on exponential organizations at Singularity University. And it became the most popular lecture in the courses, because it's one thing to understand the disruption. What do you do about it is then how do you organize for it is the more interesting question, obviously enough. Obviously, the follow-up question. And so I kind of ran this lecture on exponential organizations for a year or 2. And then Paul Sappho said to me, you should write a book on this. I'm still cursing him for that suggestion, although it's worked out well. So we started planning the book. Then I started structuring the book and gathering content. Then Yuri Van Gies popped up and said, hey, I can do the research and do some of the writing. So we agreed a royalty split, and he and his team, principally a fellow called Mikhail Sherman, popped up and said, we'll do the research side. And we did the whole thing in a tool called Workflowy, which is a great outlining tool. And I can actually share that with you folks at some point. Peter then popped up and said, I'd love to co-author this book with you. So Peter was supposed to be a co-author on EXO, and we actually developed a lot of the concepts together. The idea of it should be 10x bigger than its competitors is one of Peter's metrics and definition. The idea for chapter 5 of having headlines summarizing the implication, that was Peter's idea. MTP was actually my idea. Very notable little anecdote around ideas and scale, because lots of people have asked me, how did that come about? So I'm sitting at Singularity, and what had happened was Yuri and I spent about 2 days brainstorming, because it's very complex trying to figure out this acronym, because you can label staff on demand, you can call them on-demand staff, you can call them employees on demand people. So you can have multiple letters on multiple attributes, and they all have to kind of fit together into something sensible. So Yuri and I spent about 2 days on a whiteboard trying to figure it out. And then Peter and I spent half a day on a whiteboard trying to figure it out. Peter went off by himself for half a day. Yuri went off by himself for collectively about 2 weeks of attention went to this. And we got kind of nowhere. We're kind of stuck in this whole thing. And I was sitting one day, and one of the alumni from Singularity, a young lady called Sarah Sklarczyk, walks by, and I said, Sarah, you're pretty smart. Can you have a look at this? And she looked at it, and she kind of went da 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 da. In 3 minutes, she came up with scale and ideas, and I was like, holy crap, that was unbelievable. And then she said, by the way, do you have an Advil? I have a migraine. And I was like, you did that on a migraine, that's just absurd. So that's where scale and ideas came along, and the model was born. We wrote the chapters where we would outline each one with 10 or 15 bullet points of the major points we wanted to make. And then they would research anecdotes and ideas and come back. We read 70 business books summarizing strategy, et cetera, in preparation for all of this. Took about a year. It took about a year and a half of research of understanding and looking at unicorns and how they were moving, TED using community, Uber using the crowd, etc. And then about 2.5 years of writing. And so we would outline it. They would do some research, come back with a proposed thing. We would do 10 or so bullet points per bullet point in the outline and go more and more deeper. And basically then once it was kind of to a point, I would write it and then send it to Mike Malone, the ghostwriter, who made it 10x better. And what was really fabulous was at the end of all of that, we would send it to the editor. And I don't know if you've ever been part of a book proposal or book process, but I'm a pretty good writer. Yuri and his team looked at it. Mike Malone is a 20 books author, a very famous writer. We then looked at it again, and then we finally sent it to the copy editor. And it was mind-boggling that she redlined almost every second word because the grammar was off, or we had hanging participles or whatever. And literally, it's a sea of red lines on the, when we thought after 5 people looked at it. It's kind of unbelievable. So the book came out in about 2 months before the book published. Peter popped up and said, I can't be a co-author. I've got another book coming out, and my publisher is freaking out. And so he ended up not being a co-author. So he wrote the foreword and the afterword, and it came out. For the first 3 months after it came out, it turned out August 2014 was the worst possible time in the history of mankind to launch a book, because Eric Schmidt was launching his book, Peter Thiel was launching his book, Ebola was raging, and it was just a bad time. So it launches, and for about 3 months, there's not a single peep about the book, not a single review, no commentary. And I was like, oh, crap. And you think, okay, I tried, you give it a shot, etc. And then around Christmas, New Year's, reviews started popping on Amazon. And then you realize nobody has time to read. And I look at the stack of books on my bedside table, and that ratifies it. And then during 2015, 2016, for about 2 years, it was the highest rated business book on Amazon ever. And then it's kind of gone from there. So super kind of fascinating background. I'll tell one last story, which is the visual designer, the design of the book. So in true to our principle, we used somebody from Odesk, Elance, now called Upwork, to do the graphics design, the brain diagram and the cover design, etc. And it was like $20 an hour, etc. Vijay Anma, another GSP alumni, said, I'll help project manage the book. Some folks like Kent and Yaroslav were helping draft, and many of you, about 100 people, help read early drafts of the book. Last year, I got a ping from Vijay saying, hey, that graphics designer you talked to wants to talk to you. And I said, oh, what about? And he said, well, he wants to invest in EXO. I said, invest? I thought he was a graphics designer, Upwork. I didn't think he had money to invest. And he said, oh, didn't you know? I said, didn't I know what? Well, he read the book cover to cover to understand the thesis behind it, got excited by crypto, got involved in it heavily, bought a bunch of Bitcoin, and the graphics designer has made $10 million in crypto out of doing the design for the book. And you go, crazy, but there's the world there. All right, so let's talk about the second edition. It's long been due for an update, and it was such a traumatic experience writing the first damn book. Many of you know I'm kind of a high-level, hand-waving type of guy. 80,000 words of detail is anathema for me from a style perspective, so very difficult proposition from that perspective. But your name's on it, so you want to kind of make sure, right? I'm much more proud of it than I thought I would be. And so the question is, what should the second edition cover? And I'd like to open it up to a broader discussion, but here's our current thinking, and then we can open it up a little bit. The current thinking is that we limit the scope of the second book. So we want to do the second book very differently, the second edition. And in order to get out of the publishing contracts and legal structures of royalties, etc., the second edition, if it's more than 40% different, we can kind of give the book away for free if you want, and so on. So that's one mandate. So there's 2 ways of doing that. One is to chop old stuff, and the other is to add new stuff, right? And so we think about doing a combination of both. And the idea we've had is to limit the scope of the second edition to chapters 1 to 5 of the current first edition, which is basically the attributes, the rationale for EXOs, and the implications of EXOs, and then have a couple more chapters on top of that, but keep it as kind of a reference book, and then do startup EXOs separately, big company EXOs separately, etc., and do follow that process along. And so that's the current thinking. In the first book, we've aimed at, here's how you do. The first half of the book is analytical, and here's the model that we've teased out. The second half is prescriptive on how do you apply it. Now, honestly, when I launched the book, people said, business book, shelf life of 18 months or so, 12 to 18 months, milk it while it's hot, but then something will come along that will kind of be the next thing. And I have to be honest, I can't believe in 6 years nobody's come up with something better or different, sufficiently different or new. The closest is probably Loonshots. Sunila and I have talked about this a bit, but that seemed to be complementary to this, not replicative. And I think what we've got in EXO is a meta model of, okay, here are the business building blocks that go into building an organization. And once you have a meta model, then it's hard to dislodge that. So I think we have an extraordinary opportunity here to really put a stake in the ground and basically say all organizations from now on will be EXOs. And if you're not, you won't survive, because organizations of the future have to be purpose-driven, scalable, adaptable, decentralized, right? And the attributes that we have roughly cover those 4 or 5 things. And in the future, all organizations, we believe, will be this way. And so that's the marketing stake I think we'll be able to, and claim that we'll be able to make, which gives us a very powerful position to being involved. Now, the first couple of times we said, who wants to help curate some of the chapters, et cetera, et cetera. And many of you have put your hands up, and super appreciate that. And deep apologies for not having responded quickly enough. But I'm actually thankful that we didn't do it a year ago or 18 months ago like we thought. So now is a really great time to redo this. And the process we're looking at is as follows. If you held your hand up to say, I want to help curate chapter 3, great. The way we're thinking about doing that is today is a scoping discussion. And then what we'll do is pick the chapters basically today, ideally. And then for the next few months, every 2 weeks, we'll do an open global webinar on chapter 3, chapter 4, et cetera, and open it up to the whole world. Let people comment on the anecdotes, tips and tricks, et cetera, that they might want to see added in. Yaroslav and a couple of others went and reread the book in preparation for this new project. And they came back and said, look, the ideas are so succinct and the flow is so good. Hard to see how you improve this by 40% or change it by 40%. Where there is a lot of scope, obviously, is updating the stories, adding new techniques, tips and tricks for implementation, failure modes, case studies, stats, like our Fortune 100 analysis, a little more on the EXQ, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole bunch of things that go into that could add into those chapters. And so maybe we look at the flow of the ideas, but we do a ton more on the anecdotal side. And we end up with a book that's basically a chapter per attribute, okay? And then a few new chapters at the end. So the scope would be the model itself. And then later on, we can look at publishing a book on EXO startups and EXO big companies, et cetera, and look at that on government, healthcare, education, and so on. So that's the proposed discussion that I want to have. So Kevin, I think I've covered all the major points that I wanted to make for this. There are 5 proposed chapters that I can think of and that have come up already. One is an additional chapter on design thinking. We've decided, by the way, one stake in the ground we've put in is that we don't want to change scale and ideas in MTP. I don't want to go through the hell of trying to recreate the acronym and make it adaptable. The model is very strong the way it is, but we can have subsequent chapters that can treat 3 or 4 topics. And here are the 4 or 5 that I'm proposing. One is that we do a chapter on design thinking, because design thinking is the discipline that binds different technologies and methodologies together with aesthetic. And it's something that if I had to go back, we might want to add that in. The second is business models of the future that are abundance-based business models. Today, we're going from operating companies to platforms to ecosystems. And some discussion on that, I think, is an important part, because as people think about the org structure, they need to think about what are the business models of the future and what would those look like. The third commentary would be the economy. And I think it might be worth having a chapter on the broader macro dollar economy as we move from scarcity to abundance, the rise of importance of cryptocurrencies, the lack, as Jerry Mikulski talks about, most business models are based on scarcity, and now we're moving to abundance. What does that look like? So I think money and business models is a really key one, maybe before even the structural platform ecosystem discussion. And then it may be worth having a final chapter on the tool sets that we provide, like the Canvas, the Sprint, etc., so people have something they can pick up and grab, and so on. One suggestion we have for the book is write the book, etc., curate it, edit it, and if people want a free PDF, they can have it for free. Many people have said to me it's one of the books they keep on their shelf. Many executives carry it around in their dang briefcase, we've learned. And so if you want to print it and have it ready, then you can pay a fee and print it, but the book can be free. And so that's an approach and an idea we have. So those are all the major comments I wanted to make. Kevin, why don't I turn it over to you from a technical perspective and look at what do we do here and how do we bring this forward? And do you want me to move over to Hopin or stay here on StreamYard?
Perfect. So thanks so much, Salim. Really appreciate that. So what we're going to do now is we are going to go to breakout sessions for 15 minutes. And really what we want to do there is to discuss the scope. So Salim has suggested some additional chapters. We're looking at the scale and ideas attributes, being major chapters, and removing from chapter 6 on in terms of implementation, and looking at that in separate post this one. And so what I'm going to do now is in the chat on the stage, I'm going to post a link to a Google sheet, which is going to have your name and the room you need to go to. If you have just joined and your name isn't there, because I see that a whole bunch of people have joined, you can just join one of the rooms between there's between 1 and 30, so you can join one of the rooms and have a discussion there. And then I've created a Miro board. I'll also share that link, and you can use that to actually document what you're saying. What I did want to just remind everyone is every single one of these groups are being recorded. So we are recording every breakout, and in that way we can go back to find information, things that you have shared. It is all being recorded. It's going to become a lot of hours of recording, but that's really awesome. So I am going to now in the chat, I am going to share the Google Drive link, which is going to be in the stage chat. So it's just been put there now. So if you can go there and find your name, as I said, if you don't find your name, just join one of the groups. And then if you can, I will be sharing the Miro board link right now as well. And you can click on that, and that's where you can have your discussions within your group, where you can document what you're speaking about. So that's what I wanted to share. If everybody can head over to the sessions and join the session that you are due to join. Salim, if you can head over to Hopin and you can randomly join some rooms in the 15 minutes. And then if we look at the time, we'd say 1/4 to the hour, We will need to be back here on the stage just to wrap up the call today. So thanks, everybody. We will see you in the sessions now. Thanks, everyone.
And we'll do some voting in the last 15 minutes. So be ready for those.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.
So Kevin, I'll mute myself and then go to the rooms?
Correct.
Okay. Is there a way we can have a group voice discussion, or is it too hard?
We can in a session, so we can discuss that.
Okay. This may fail a bit. Okay. can hear me. Is that the truth? Oh, there we go. All right, folks, welcome back. Thank you, Kevin, for organizing that breakout session. I dropped into two of the rooms for a few minutes each. I got to tell you, very rich commentary and some great feedback. I'm going to suggest that we do almost like a 2-3 hour Zoom in the next few days and delve into it more, where people can get into it and throw out some ideas. The 3 or 4 suggestions that I came across was Sanjay Bhana and a couple of others, and Eric Patel saying, make sure you keep chapter 6, because how you build an EXO is really, really critical and should be in the 2nd edition. So I think, all right, we just added another chapter. The other conversation I had was Matthias saying we should really have a discussion about sustainability, and whatever our position is, let's not ignore it, because the earth and the resources we're using is incredibly fragile, as we can see in California right now. Or if you're in California, you can't see anyway, but etc. Another comment was tools for implementing the attributes should be a key part of it. So I'm thinking that we have a chapter per attribute, and in each chapter you say, you keep the original flow of ideas and the rationale of it, and etc. And then we do 4 or 5 subsections on implementation, tips and tricks, case studies, failure modes, interdependencies with other attributes. For example, we now know that lean doesn't work on its own. You need MTP and autonomy to really implement lean effectively, right? And it comes after having an MTP, for example, if you're building an EXO, and we should speak to that. Somebody else suggested that we should have a kind of a tool set, there's a machine learning canvas apparently, and so give people more how-to guides on how to implement the various attributes, which I think is a great idea. Plus the resources of who's implemented algorithms, which EXOs have done that, and so on. So I think those are key points that we can add to it. Kevin, I'm wondering if you would willing to throw up some polls, because I want to get some voting into this. Let's take it as a done deal that we will organize let's say minimum 2-3 hour event, maybe next week, to kind of get into some of the discussion as a group, because it'll allow us to go to the next layer down and say, what do we do about sustainability? To what extent do we have design thinking? Somebody in one of the rooms suggested that design thinking is just a part of experimentation. And I'm sure Sunil Malhotra will have some words about that, strong words about that one. Somebody else suggested we should have 3 pillars around how we approach EXO, buildings of EXO. One is the technologies, mindset, and then the methodologies. So that's an interesting way of framing the conversation there. So I would like to throw up 3 or 4 polls here. And Kevin, can you help me do that? Do we have Kevin?
Yes, you do have me, Salim. So I have just thrown up a poll which says, would you like to join a longer Zoom? Yes or no? Okay. So that's one that's just gone up. So it's an easy one for people to answer. So if you want to answer that now, that'll be great. And yes, Salim, we can definitely get more poll questions up right now on the platform.
Okay. Well, some people Kevin put up a poll. What do you think about the scope? Some people are saying you're neutral. Neutral is not good enough. Tell us why you're not a yes. If it's not great, why isn't it great? And if you don't mind doing that thinking, because that feedback is really, really critical. Just a quick story going back to the first book. I finished the first full draft with Yuri and the team in June 2014, end of June. So we're like August, September, we're like 2 months from publication. Publishers freaking out, saying, I need the manuscript like yesterday. And I said, I really would like to get some feedback. So I emailed 100 people saying, if you can give me feedback in the next 2 weeks, I'll incorporate your feedback in the book. But I'd love to get some thoughts. What do you think of it? And I figure 100 people, full book, 2 weeks, maybe 7, 8, 9 people would have time to read it and give me feedback. 40 of you gave me feedback. So now I had the nightmare of having to have one person say, I want more detail here, and the next person saying, I think there should be less detail, and who do you believe? I ended up drinking a bottle of wine a night for 2 months and handed in the final manuscript 1 week before October 14th. It was October 7th. And the publisher told me later they put the book on a USB stick and had one of their people sprint 10 blocks in Manhattan down to the printer to get the printing done on time. So the actual time to really print a book is 7 days, not 3 months like they say. But it was very, very stressful for them. And I drank a lot of wine, and my liver suffered for ages afterwards. The commentary around that, I think, is a critical one in the Zoom. Here's the other ones I'd like to suggest that I'd like to get into. One is, what do we think of about a chapter on design thinking? Yes or no? Or do we incorporate it? Should design thinking have its own chapter? That's the poll. Okay. Next poll is, should we have a chapter on business models, platforms, and ecosystems? Which should that be a separate chapter? Okay. And Kevin, if you can throw those up, that would be great. Third, should we have a chapter on the sprint, on the EXO sprint? Should we have a chapter on government? So that's a fourth. And should we have a chapter on the future of the economy? Jeff Booth's commentary about the macroeconomy and we're basically printing money like water right now. What do we do about that? And is it worth a chapter on the macroeconomic situation? I was thinking about closing the book with a final chapter talking, and maybe this is where we include sustainability, talking about civilization as a whole, and putting out my 4 observations that I've talked about, which is, number one, we have 20 Gutenberg moments and black swans hitting us at the same time, Corona being one of them, but autonomous cars, drones, CRISPR, those are all each solar energy, those are each Gutenberg moments and fundamentally change society. Number 2, that our institutions all break in the face of this. And we need to have processes. And we're actually working on a design, which I showed a little bit in my EXO vision commentary around how would we go about doing that, a sprint for rebuilding institutions like journalism, education, etc. But all our institutions will break. That's the second observation. The third is our existing leaders clearly cannot navigate us through this. They're all trained in 20th century incremental, stable, linear environments. And the fourth observation is that most of the action is happening at a local, small country, small city level or city state. So those are the kind of commentary. And the fact that if we don't shift ourselves over to this, whatever the new model is, then where do we go from there? And we won't survive as a global species. So that's the way we've been thinking about it. Here's the other polls. Should we have a chapter on the future of civilization? Should we have a chapter on the sprint? Okay, should we have a chapter on government? God dang. Should there be a chapter on platforms? Very strong. Yes, there. Chapter on design thinking, a little bit more meaningful, meandering there. All right, we've added 6 chapters then. God dang. Okay. So let me close with the following couple of thoughts. First of all, I want to thank all of you really deeply for being part of this community, bringing your passion and your expertise and your experiences to it. I want to kind of, as we write this next book, say it's a community written book and curated in the whole world. So I'm going to just recap. We're going to pick the chapters and the scope. Let's do it after our detailed conversation, because clearly we just touched open the cap on the bottle here, and we have to really get into it. We'll decide the scope of the book, and then we'll do a chapter every 2 weeks, like a drumbeat, and people can invite their customers and clients and friends and colleagues to it to really go with that, and we'll make it publicly open to the whole world. I don't believe a book's ever been developed this way. And then people can take the contents of each webinar, where people can suggest anecdotes and which ones work or not, etc., and do the curators that want to work on that can take that and boil it down to the additions to that chapter in a separate Google Doc, and then we can all work the thing onwards. At the end of it, we have a book. Do it as a free PDF is one proposal, and then if you want to print it, you pay and you get it delivered to you in a nice hardcover thing or paperback, etc. So that's the approach we'll take around that. And I'd like to do a vote on that as well, if at some point, but we can do that in the detailed discussion around this. People seem to really like the civilization and the platforms side of things, so that's great. Let me first of all also thank Kevin for organizing this on short notice, and thank you all for showing up on short notice. I really want to go back to the commentary around EXOs. I think we all know that all in the future things will be EXO related. It's still amazing to me that nothing similar has popped up. Loon Shots by Safi Bakal is the closest, but it's complementary, as we said, and so we'll see what happens with that. And we'll use EXO World as kind of the media arm to kind of promote these webinars and get them out there. One last point I want to make. Now, some of you may be aware of this or not, but we are going to try and raise some money in the next few months, launch a TV channel for EXO World so that we can do regular EXO World events. And also, one of the uses of funds would be to create a top-level domain, a TLD, which would be like .com or .org, a .exo. Okay, and what we can do then is to say, if you think you're an exponential organization, apply here, go through a EXQ survey with one of our people in our community, which you'll pay for, and then we'll stamp you as an EXO and give you a .exo domain, which will be of interesting credibility and for investors and a market signal, etc. And if you're valid EXO in the future, it'll look embarrassing if you're not, and see how we do with that. So that may be a very powerful way of pushing the meme out, and we're pretty excited about that going forward. Okay, so I think we're running out of time here. I want to make sure we respect that. I'm really excited about this new process and where we've gotten to. Clearly, the world needs us and needs that second edition. I want to mention one last thing that's happened in the last few weeks. Some of you may be interested in and may have heard about oceanexo.org. Oceanexo.org. So Nishan Degnarain, who was the Minister of Oceans, found himself in the middle of this oil tanker that broke up over Mauritius, called us and said, could we help? Do we know developers, etc.? We connected with Fluid Chains, which are now taking all the satellite images, fishing boat logs, citizen journalism photographs, and geocoding them and tagging them to a blockchain so that they can then later on have the evidence to go after the oil tanker and show what policy should be. This morning, and this is somewhat confidential, so please don't broadcast this, but this morning we got donations, a donation to seed this money from one of the biggest CEOs in the world, and you can we'll ping that on our ambassadors WhatsApp group and put an announcement on OpenEXO platform as to who that is. They prefer to stay somewhat anonymous, but it's one of the biggest CEOs in the world who's now seed funded oceanexo.org. So we're starting to look at, okay, how do we apply this in different areas? Kevin, I think we're running out of time. I'll turn it over to you to close the show. Thank you so much again. I think this was awesome, and I cannot wait.
Thank you so much, Salim. My internet actually went down, and I thought the whole stream went down, but it seems like it didn't. So that's really good. I was super worried for about 2 minutes. Thanks, everyone, for joining. The event is going to be open for a full day. So if you want to come in here and continue the conversations here in Hopin, you can do that with pleasure. For those of you who are watching this after the fact, thank you so much. You can join a session. You can share what you want to share. Really, thanks, everybody, for part of this amazing community. And we look forward to the next.
I'll go to one of the breakouts.
Your last thoughts.
I'm going to go to one of the breakouts for about 15 minutes if people want to join and hang out there for a bit. Otherwise, see you next week at the deeper dive, and we'll get this show on the road. Thanks, everyone. And thanks, Kevin.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Sure, right. It's a pleasure. Bye, everyone.
All right, assume I can just close my StreamYard, right?
Correct.